If you haven't heard, we recently launched a podcast called Into the Killing. In every episode, we'll examine cold cases that were solved, often decades after the crime was committed. Into the Killing is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. In our first episode, we discussed 2 murder cases that were major milestones in the world of forensic science. A new episode of Into the Killing is available every Wednesday. Please check it out, the links are in the description box. But before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our sponsor, Jackpot Party Casino. Hi everyone. I know it's been a crazy few weeks, but something has made my life a bit more exciting, and that's my favorite mobile game, Jackpot Party. Ain't no party like a jackpot party. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little excited over here. So it offers over 200 real slots from Las Vegas, but using virtual currency, making it completely free. It gives you the most thrilling experience, the same feeling you get when you're unlocking a new murder mystery. There are even spooky slots you can unlock as you go up levels in the game. My favorite has to be Winter Wolf. The mysterious background makes my inner investigator come out. I've been playing this game loads, so I've already unlocked the Rich Devil and Fallen Angels. How cool and creepy do they sound? Make sure you download it now from the link shown in my video description and comment with your Jackpot Party username. Everyone who downloads the game from my link below and comments with their username has the chance to win a $20 Amazon voucher. The winner will be announced via a pinned comment after 15 days. I absolutely love Jackpot Party because it really does give you the thrilling experience that the real Vegas slots do, and the animal slots get cuter and cuter the more levels you unlock. I honestly know you guys will love this game, and the best bit is you can play no matter where you are in the world. So download Jackpot Party for free from the link in my description and find an amazing worldwide adventure with a completely free-to-play casino game like you've never seen before. Number 3. Bernita White. Artist and Bernita White lived in Lansing, Michigan. Bernita was a systems analyst for a data company called Electronic Data Systems. Artist was a sergeant detective with the Michigan State Police. The couple had 2 daughters. On June 23, 2001, 41-year-old Bernita and their 5-year-old daughter were in the picnic playground area of the Potter Park Zoo in Lansing. They were there for a birthday party. Sometime after 3 o'clock, Artist arrived at the park to pick them up. The playground picnic area was just outside the zoo. Artist said that their daughter wanted to go into the zoo, and he and Bernita initially said no. Then the girl threw a tantrum, so they relented and agreed to go to the zoo. Their 7-year-old daughter was at another park, Delta Mills Park, which is about 10 miles from the zoo. Artist volunteered to pick her up and bring her back so they could all go to the zoo together. At 3:30, Bernita and her 5-year-old daughter left the picnic playground area. When they walked away, there were about 300 people in the area enjoying the beautiful weather. Bernita and her daughter walked along the path towards the ticket booth. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. Bernita was shot in the left shoulder. The bullet went through her heart and out the other side of her body. Sadly, the 41-year-old mother of 2 died at the scene. That night, about 7 hours after Bernita was murdered, Bernita's 67-year-old mother, Barbara Sims, was informed of her death. Barbara had a heart attack and died that night. The police shut the park down for 2 days after the shooting. They figured out that the shooter had to be at least 100 yards away. He or she had fired the bullet through the picnic playground area and hit Bernita in the left shoulder. The police searched for the bullet because it would help them identify what type of rifle was used. They ended up cutting down a tree, but the bullet had not ended up there. They also searched a nearby river that was in the bullet's path. But once again, nothing was found. The bullet has never been found, and it's not known what type of gun was used. All that is known is that it was a high-caliber rifle. A crime scene expert said that the murder was not the work of an amateur rifleman. The shooter knew what bullet and what gun to use to get the job done. The shot went through a crowd of people and hit Bernita as she was walking. It would have been a very difficult shot for someone without training to make. The police immediately suspected that Artis killed his wife. He was questioned for 6 hours and he maintained his innocence. He even had an alibi and eyewitnesses to back him up. People at the Delta Mills Park, which is 10 miles from the shooting, saw him there around the time Bernita was shot. So Artis was not charged with anything and he continues to work for the state police. He got remarried and his daughters lived with him. In 2003, Artis independently published a book about the case called Who Killed My Wife? In the book, Artis claims that the Lansing police have nothing on him. A Lansing detective who worked on the case said that they have looked at many theories and disproved them all except for one. They said that they always came back to the same suspect. He has never publicly identified the suspect, but it's believed he is talking about Artis. The detective also said that many people think that there's no physical evidence in the case, but that simply isn't true, and they have a box of evidence. The detective has gone to the district attorney several times, but they do not think that there's enough evidence to make an arrest. In 2012, the case was reopened, but once again, no arrests were made. At the time of this video, the murder of Bernita White is considered a cold case. Her family and the detectives who worked on the case hope that one day soon, the case will be closed. Number 2. Johnny and Joyce Swindle. Johnny and Joyce Swindle grew up in Jasper, Alabama. They were childhood sweethearts. On January 18, 1984, the two 19-year-olds got married. At the time, Johnny was enlisted in the Navy. For their honeymoon, they were staying in a 3-room cottage in San Diego, California that was close to the beach. The couple would fish during the day and then take walks along the ocean in the evenings. On February 5, 1964, Johnny did some painting for a woman who was renting the cottage to them. That evening, the couple went for a walk on a cement path along the seawall. Another person was walking on the path and they came across the couple bleeding to death. The police and an ambulance were called for. 19-year-old Joyce Swindle was pronounced dead on sight. Johnny was taken to the hospital and he died a few hours later. The police determined that the shooter was perched on a cliff above the path. He or she fired 5 shots and then they got down close to Johnny and Joyce. Then, he or she shot them each once in the head. The police thought that 2 different guns were used and they were both .22 calibers. Close to the bodies, the police found a box of Valentine's Day candy. The police thought that the couple may have picked it up on their walk, or the killer could have left it behind as a calling card. The police were baffled as to why someone would want to kill the couple. They were on their honeymoon and they did not know anyone in the area. Also, only Johnny's watch was stolen, so the police didn't think that robbery was the motive. The police decided it was most likely the work of a thrill killer. Unfortunately, no arrests have ever been made in the case. There is speculation that these weren't the only murders that the killer committed. On June 5, 1963, high school sweethearts, 18-year-old Robert Domingo and 17-year-old Linda Edwards, were on an isolated beach just outside Govita, California. They were set to graduate from high school in 2 days. They weren't in school that day because it was senior skip day. The couple had plans to marry that November. When the couple didn't return home that evening, their families reported them missing. Robert's father went to the beach where the couple said they were heading that day. He found their dead bodies under a lean-to. Robert had been shot 11 times, and Linda had been shot 8 times. The gun was a .22 caliber, but it's not clear if it was a rifle or a handgun. Robert still had his shorts on, but Linda's bathing suit had been cut off. Her bathing suit was on top of her body. There were no signs of sexual assault. Robert had a bruise on his lip, so it's believed he fought with the killer. They were shot in the nearby creek and then dragged to the lean-to. Part of the lean-to was burnt and there were some used matches. So it's thought that the killer wanted to burn the bodies but couldn't get the fire started. There are several reasons why people think the crimes are connected. Both were couples in their late teens who were shot to death next to the ocean. All 4 victims were shot multiple times with a .22 caliber gun. The murders were committed exactly 8 months apart, and they were both committed on the 5th of the month. But the murders were committed 240 miles apart from each other. That being said, it would not be difficult to drive from one location to the other. It would only take about 4.5 hours. It's also possible that the killer lived somewhere between the 2 shooting locations, so the drive to either location would be about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Some people even believe they know who is responsible for the 4 murders. They think they were killed by the infamous and still unidentified serial killer, the Zodiac. In his letters, the Zodiac has alluded that he has killed 37 people. If he did kill the couples, it would make them his earliest victims. The first confirmed victims of the Zodiac were 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen. They were shot to death in their car in Benicia, California. Their murders happened 4 years and 10 months after Johnny and Joyce Swindle were shot to death. Then 8 months before the Swindles were killed, Robert Domingo and Linda Edwards were killed. David and Betty Lou were murdered about 560 miles from the Swindle crime scene and 322 miles from where Robert and Linda were killed. People suspect that the Zodiac killed Robert and Linda and the Swindles for several reasons. Notably, in 4 of the 5 confirmed Zodiac attacks, he attacked 3 young couples who were alone. Many of the victims were shot. So there are similarities between the murders committed by the Zodiac and the murders of the Swindles and Robert and Linda. But many people think that there is a stronger connection to an unconfirmed victim of the Zodiac. 2 years and 9 months after the Swindles were killed, on the day before Halloween in 1966, 18-year-old Sherry Jo Bates drove over to the library on the Riverside City College campus in Riverside, California. She left the campus library around 9 p.m., but she never made it home. The next morning, at around 6 a.m., one of the school's custodians came across her body on a dirt road on the campus, not far from the library. She was lying face down and she was fully clothed. She had been beaten, stabbed multiple times in the back, the chest, and the head, and her throat had been slit. Her car was in the parking lot and it wasn't working. It turned out it had been sabotaged. The police believe that the killer disabled the motor so he could offer Bates a ride, or at least leave her stranded and vulnerable. For a long time, the Zodiac has been a suspect in the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. On March 15, 1971, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter from the Zodiac. He wrote, "I do have to give them credit for stumbling across my Riverside activity, but they are only finding the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there." Many people think that this statement is a reference to the Bates murder because she was killed in Riverside. Riverside is between the locations where Robert Domingo and Linda Edwards were murdered and where Johnny and Joyce Swindle were shot to death. Not far from Sherry Jo Bates' body, a Timex watch was found. The wristband had been broken. The theory was that Bates fought back against her attacker and ripped the watch off. But other people think that the killer intentionally left the watch there. They think it's Johnny Swindle's watch, which was stolen after he was shot. What is noteworthy is that the watch found near Sherry Jo Bates' body had specks of paint on it. This is a picture of the actual watch, and although paint specks are not clearly visible, the police have said there are paint specks on it. Just hours before Johnny was killed, he did some painting for his landlady. But it's important to note that no one has ever confirmed that it was Johnny's watch that was found at the crime scene. Also, no other physical evidence connects the murders of the Swindles to the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. Today it's unknown who killed the Swindles and if their murders are connected to any other murders. Like a lot of people, Johnny's sister believes that they were early victims of the Zodiac. But this theory may never definitively be proven. If you are interested in finding out more about the murder of Sherry Jo Bates and the Zodiac, please check out our video, 3 Haunting Anonymous Confessions to Unsolved Murders Part 2. There's a link in the description box, and we'll have a link at the end of this video. Number 1. Rhonda Hinson. In the lead up to Christmas 1981, Rhonda Hinson was 19 years old. She lived with her parents and her younger brother in Valdez, North Carolina. Rhonda had a clerical job at a steel factory in nearby Hickory, North Carolina. On the night of December 22nd, 1981, Rhonda attended her work's Christmas party at an American Legion in Hickory. Rhonda had a boyfriend, Greg McDowell, but she chose to go to the party without him. Shortly after midnight, Rhonda left the party with 2 of her friends. She drove one of her friends home, and then she went to the home of her other friend. At that friend's home, Rhonda called her boyfriend, Greg. After the phone call, Rhonda told her friend that Greg was mad and that they may break up. Rhonda then got into her recently purchased 1981 tan-colored Datsun 210 MP6. She then started the 10-mile trek home. But sadly, she never made it there. Rhonda's mother, Judy, had been asleep, but she woke up shortly after midnight with a terrible sense of dread. For some reason, she knew something horrible had happened to Rhonda. She felt so anxious that she got her husband and Rhonda's father, Bobby, out of bed. Eventually, Rhonda's younger brother also got out of bed. At about 1:30 a.m., Rhonda's brother called Greg to see if Rhonda was at his home. Greg said she wasn't there and he didn't know where she was. After the call, Greg's father, Reverend Charles McDowell, supposedly went out looking for her. It turned out that Rhonda had been found hours earlier. About half a mile from her home, there was a steep incline. As Rhonda was driving up the incline, a bullet entered the rear of the car, went through the back seat, through the driver's seat, and entered Rhonda's heart. After she was shot, her car rolled backward, crossed over lanes, and ended up in the ditch. Two young men happened to drive by Rhonda's car. They parked their car nearby, and they went to check out the vehicle in the ditch. The driver's door was open, and they saw blood on the seat. They also noticed a bullet hole in the driver's seat. They went and found a police officer who came to the scene. He found the dead body of 19-year-old Rhonda Hinson. She was lying on her back at the rear of the car, with her head resting on the rear driver's side wheel. The police thought that the position of the body was odd. Because of her injury, the police did not think that Rhonda would have been able to exit the car by herself. Rhonda was very safety conscious and always wore her seatbelt. After being shot in the heart, she probably would have not been able to get her seatbelt off, open the door, and get out of the car. So it's suspected that the killer pulled her out of the car. Over an hour after Rhonda's body was found, her boyfriend's father, Charles McDowell, happened upon the crime scene. He asked the police what had happened, but they refused to tell him anything, so he went home. The police talked to several witnesses who were in the area around the time Rhonda was shot. One was a woman who was driving home after work, and she was in the area several minutes before Rhonda was shot. She saw a blue GM Chevrolet parked next to the off-ramp that Rhonda got off of. It was parked facing the direction of Rhonda's home. The car was parked about 200 yards from where Rhonda's car and body were found. The witness said that inside the car were two young, white men. After the shooting, a man was driving down the same road where Rhonda had been shot. He said he passed a blue car that was speeding away from the area. He then saw Rhonda's car in the ditch. He said he saw a blonde woman in the car slumped over the steering wheel. A young white man was standing beside the open driver's side door. The witness said he didn't get a good look at the man standing beside the car. He said he didn't stop because he assumed it was a drunk couple and he didn't want to deal with it. The same witness agreed to be hypnotized. Under hypnosis, he said that the car driving away from the scene was a 70s model Chevelle. There was something wrong with the front end. He also said that the young man standing beside the car had dark brown hair, he had a medium build, and he was between 5'10" and 6 feet tall. The witness also recalled a new detail under hypnosis. After he drove by Rhonda's car, he passed another car that was parked on the side of the road. The car was a dark blue Trans Am. It was later determined that the Trans Am belonged to one of the young men who reported the scene to the police officer. It's possible that the young man the witness saw beside the car was one of the young men who alerted the police. The problem is that the witness who was in the car saw a blonde woman in the driver's seat, whereas the young men were adamant that the car didn't have anyone in it when they found it. They said that they saw blood and a bullet hole in the driver's seat, and they didn't see a body. Once they saw the driver's seat, they immediately left the scene and found a police officer. The officer was the one who found the body. A possible explanation for the conflicting accounts is that the witnesses didn't remember things accurately, which is a common problem with eyewitness accounts. At first, the police thought that Rhonda's murder was just a random act of violence. They thought it was just a maniac sniper and she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Around the same time that Rhonda was murdered, several drivers in the area reported to the police that as they were driving, the windows of their vehicles were hit with projectiles. Rhonda's family, on the other hand, thought she may have been targeted. The more the investigators began to look into the case, the more they believed that the family is right. Rhonda graduated from high school about 6 months before she was murdered. Shortly after graduation, Rhonda went on a camping trip to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina with her boyfriend, Greg McDowell, her best friend, Jill Turner Mull, and Jill's boyfriend, Mark Turner. Greg and Mark were friends. On the trip, Rhonda and Greg got into several arguments. Supposedly, at one point, Greg went down to the beach and tried to pick up other young women, and Rhonda caught him. Rhonda and Greg stayed together after the trip, but Rhonda's family noticed a change in her. She was often despondent and gloomy. She also seemed a bit paranoid and didn't like driving alone. She'd often ask her father to come with her when she ran errands. On one of these drives, Rhonda said something odd to her father, Bobby. She said she had something to tell him, and it was bad. Bobby told his daughter she could tell him anything. She then changed her mind and said she couldn't tell him, but she said she would think about telling him. Another day, Rhonda asked her mother if it was ever okay to date a married man. Her mother said it wasn't because someone always ends up getting hurt. Rhonda told her mother she was asking because her friend was dating a married man. Rhonda had also been suffering from insomnia. Sometimes she would sleep at the foot of her parents' bed. She also asked her younger brother if she could sleep in his room. She even offered him money to let her sleep in the room. But her brother refused to let her sleep in his bedroom. Sometimes in the middle of the night, when Rhonda couldn't sleep, she would shower or have a bath. Her mother asked her why she was doing that. She said it was because she always felt dirty. According to experts, these are symptoms of women who were sexually abused. Some people have speculated that Rhonda was sexually assaulted by the father of her boyfriend, Charles McDowell. Several people who were close to Rhonda said that she didn't like Charles, and some said that she was afraid of him. Rhonda said that Charles would say inappropriate things to her. Sometimes when he walked by her, he would inappropriately brush up against her body. Charles McDowell, who was a reverend, presided over Rhonda's funeral. Many people who were in attendance were shocked by what Charles talked about in the middle of the service. Charles openly speculated if Rhonda got into heaven or if she went to hell. 4 days after Rhonda's murder, Charles resigned as pastor of the church. A month after the murder, Charles visited Judy Hinson for the first time since her daughter was murdered. Charles was cold and standoffish. He said that his son Greg was fine and eventually he'd move on and forget Rhonda. Judy accused Charles of killing Rhonda and he denied it, saying he and his family loved Rhonda. While some people believe that Charles sexually assaulted Rhonda, they don't necessarily believe he had anything to do with her murder. The investigators believe that as Rhonda was driving home, she stopped the car near the beginning of the incline. They believe that someone was standing at the side of the road and Rhonda stopped to talk to him or her. Rhonda was then shot as she drove away from the person. Rhonda's family believes she would have only stopped if she knew the person. They do not think she would have stopped to talk to Charles, but they do think that Rhonda would have stopped to talk to her boyfriend, Greg, who was Charles's son. Several people claim that Greg was abusive. On the night of the murder, Rhonda and Greg had a fight. Just before Rhonda drove home, she called Greg from her friend's house. After the call, Rhonda told her friend that Greg was angry. Greg knew that Rhonda was at her friend's home and then she was going to leave to drive home. So he would have known where to find Rhonda at that time of night. 2 items found in Rhonda's car seemed to be evidence that Rhonda stopped to talk to Greg that night. One was a stuffed pink snake that Greg and Rhonda got on their trip to Myrtle Beach. They had an inside joke that involved the snake. It was on the floor in front of the passenger seat. What is odd about the snake is that no one ever remembered it being in Rhonda's car before her murder. But people do remember it being in Greg's bedroom. The other item was a gray zip-up hoodie, which was on the rear deck under the rear window and behind the headrests. Earlier, on the day of the murder, Rhonda's best friend, Jill Turner Mole, was hanging out with her boyfriend, Mark Turner. Mark dropped Jill off at home, and Jill noticed Rhonda's hoodie in the back seat of his car. Mark explained that the hoodie was in his car because Rhonda had left it there when she went with him to buy Jill's Christmas gift a few days earlier. Jill asked Mark if he wanted to give it to her so she could return it to Rhonda. Mark said no because he said he would just give it to Greg. Sometime after that, Greg stopped off at Mark's house. Mark told the police he did not remember if he gave Greg the sweater. Mark explained that his memory around the time of the murder was hazy because he was on medication because he had suffered a back injury the night before Rhonda was killed. Nevertheless, investigators found the hoodie in Rhonda's car after she was killed. This has fueled speculation that Greg stopped Rhonda on the night of the murder. He gave her some items and keepsakes from their relationship, which commonly happens in breakups. She took the items and tossed them into her car. This is how the snake ended up on the floor and the sweater ended up in the back of the car. Then Rhonda drove away. It's alleged that as she was driving away, Greg shot her. Both Charles and Greg McDowell took polygraph exams. The results of Greg's first test were inconclusive, so he agreed to take a second polygraph exam. This time, he did not show any signs of deception when he was asked if he was involved in Rhonda's murder. Charles refused to take a polygraph exam for years. He finally took one in 1994, 13 years after the murder. He also passed the polygraph exam. Supposedly, Charles initially didn't want to do the polygraph exam because he had been cheating on his wife at the time of Rhonda's murder. Charles later left his wife and got remarried. The police have some physical evidence in the case. Fingerprints were found on the driver's side door, but they have never been matched to anyone. Foreign DNA was found on the sweater Rhonda was wearing, but like the fingerprints, the DNA has not been matched to anyone. According to the Burke County Sheriff's Office, Rhonda Hinson's murder is the most investigated case in their history. Sadly, no arrests have ever been made in the case. Rhonda's family is still hoping that the killer or killers will be brought to justice. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Don't forget to check out the sponsor of this video, Jackpot Party. It's a fun, free-to-play slot game. You can download Jackpot Party by clicking on the link in the description box. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.